not going to turn your cell phone off from me. You're going to let me pass do not disturb, because if I literally have a bona fide problem, I need to be able to call you.
Yep.
If you don't answer my text, I'm going to call you. And it's going to be because the barn is on fire. It's not going to be because I'm just stuck and I don't want to wait until tomorrow. And the same is also true for you. Like, if you're building something important, this is Eisenhower Matrix is a factor here for how we do things. We need to focus on what's important, not necessarily what's urgent. But if it's urgent and important, then we're going to follow this protocol. So as an owner, as a founder, you also have to protect your time, because otherwise you end up so scattered that you can't do the strategic work that you need to do. And guess what? Strategy is deep work. It's some of the deepest work there is. And if you don't do that strategy work as the founder, then the rest of the organization will suffer in the long run, because you won't be leading it forward. So you have to have those same blocks in your calendar for making strategy, for making the big next advancements. And they have to be able to be punctured, but under these rules.
Before we jump into this episode, please subscribe to this podcast, hit that notification bell if you're on YouTube, and after a listen, please give us a thumbs up, like, and share, if we've earned it. With your help, we can reach more people and deliver these valuable From the Trenches lessons to those that need it. Enjoy the episode. Hello, everybody. Welcome to another The Builders. Today, we are joined by Dave Bates. Welcome to the show, Dave.
Thank you for having me.
So Dave is an executive coach.
I am.
Very important guy. Helps a lot of people. He's in his little tagline, he has co-founder who doesn't take half of your equity. That's how he looks at himself. So that's good. So one of the things that we do on this podcast when we have somebody on for the first time is we like to learn a little bit about you, your journey, what got you here, how you landed in this amazing place in your life where you're helping all the people in the world, being their executive coach. What that journey looks like, who influenced you, why you're doing what you're doing. So with that, I hand it over to you, Dave.
Thanks. Well, we'll be here for a long time if I talk about all the people that influenced me, so I'll try to keep it short.
Cherry pick a few.
Yeah. I started my career as a technical writer at IBM, and when I was in college, I couldn't figure out what I wanted to do for a living, and I thought for a while that I'd want to be a consultant, and then I kind of had this idea that if I graduated from college and I didn't have any experience, how could I consult with people on what they needed to do? So I was kind of talking to my dad and couldn't figure out what I wanted to do, and got to the end of what I call the parental scholarship, where I used all my gen ed credits, and he said, you got to decide on a major, or you got to take a break, or you got to start paying. So I said, well, Dad, I don't know what to do. And he said, well, what do you like to do? And I said, well, I like to write and I like to talk. And so he said, well, then do that. So I got a degree in organizational communications and English with a specialty in professional writing. And then I went out to IBM, and I was at IBM for...
Just not to interrupt you, but that seems like the thing that would help you in just about anything you do going forward. Like if you learn to write...
Yeah, you hear people talk about their degree that they got and how they don't use it. That has not at all been the case for me. I have never not written, and I have never not communicated. And it's a formative part of who I am and why I do what I do. So I got out of college and I got a job at IBM as a technical writer. And within about the first year that I was there, I ended up in a leadership role as a team leader. And then a couple of years later, I found myself doing some outsourced kind of management work for IBM, came back together into this team. We had 2 team leaders, and we didn't need 2 team leaders. We only needed 1. So I ended up moving on to another group that ended up becoming a company that IBM spun out, and it became a Series A funded venture. We did that for about 18 months, and I learned a lot in that period of time about what not to do and how to make sure that you have good business financial fundamentals. I learned a lot about leadership, mostly by seeing things that didn't quite go right.
Can you give us an example of what didn't go right?
Well, when you don't have enough income and you have a lot of outflow, venture money covers a lot of bad stuff. And so
Right,
you're
right.
living
Yeah.
on your venture money and you're not adding sort of bricks to the pile in terms of cash.
Yeah.
It's easy. And we were kind of in the end of the dot-com bubble, and our exit path was to IPO. And before people really understood, I now have a better understanding of what an IPO is because of that experience. And most people, I don't think, really.
Initial public offering.
Yes, and the whole purpose of an IPO is to say, I did a thing with this much cash and I threw off this much earnings. And if I have 10 times that cash, I can throw off more than 10 times the earnings because of efficiencies and, that kind of stuff of scale. And so usually the amount of money you need in order to do that is bigger than you can raise in a private market. So you go to the public market and you obtain those funds, and then you can go and really do that explosive scale kind of stuff. Most people at that time were thinking an IPO was an opportunity to cash out and, go buy a new boat or a house that you always wanted and say you were a millionaire. Anyway, so one of the things that I collected, though, during that experience was being trained as a coach. And as we were kind of moving on from that, we could probably do a whole episode on that, the things I learned in that, and some of the stories that I learned there. I was leading pretty much all of the technical functions that weren't engineering. So I was the hardware test manager, the software test manager, the warranty guy, the field service guy, the training, national training, and call center, all that kind of stuff. And I worked for the VP of engineering and ops. But I was trained as a coach. And as we were shutting everything down, the lady who trained me as a coach said, "Dave, God put you on the planet to be a coach." And I said, "Thank you, Jane. I'm going to go off and do all these operational jobs for the next 20 years or so." And so that started a whole process of doing user interface design, UI UX stuff for Sony Ericsson and Motorola, doing technical project management for robotic dispensing system startup that I was part of. And then I did probably 12 years of consulting work for a human performance improvement company. Did some pretty crazy projects there, all leading technical projects. And at a couple of points in time, I rolled out and did my own thing. One of the things I did was I put in a bid to buy a group that laid me off because they had a product and it was a service company and they didn't really know how to manage the product. So I went and did some venture capital, dog and pony shows, and I've also run a couple of software development organizations in the process. So I've pretty much done all kinds of crazy.
You've done a lot.
Yeah,
Done a lot.
So
and was this all with the idea? Sorry, was this all with the idea of becoming a coach? You wanted to do all of this stuff so you could be more effective?
And so when I was trained as a coach, I started coaching people in the management function. And then I was the COO at a software development company, small software development company, and we were growing it, but we kind of ended up in different places. So I exited that and I thought, okay, well, it's been 20 plus years. I'll go be a coach. So I hung out sort of my shingle to be an official coach. And that's why I talk about being a coach with operating experience. I've worked in enterprise companies and I've worked in sort of little startups. I've even done my own little startup kind of things that haven't really particularly been successful, but a lot of them weren't successful because I decided I didn't want to run that particular race. And so that's when I say I'm kind of like a co-founder who doesn't take half the equity. The reason I say that is because all of the experiences that I have gone through in my career have resulted in me having to worry about the same exact things that founders and CEOs worry about. Like,
Right.
what's going on with my pipeline? How do I position in the market? My financial state is not where I need it to be. How do I make payroll? I guess I'll pay everybody else and I'll not pay myself for a little while. All of those kinds of things are things that I have personally sort of gone through and grappled with. And that's how I ended up as a coach, and with that little explanation of, like a co-founder doesn't take half the equity.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I mean, that's good. I mean, you want to work with a coach that has been there, done that. And you definitely have been there, done that. You've done a lot of things.
Here's the thing I tell people all the time, I've been there and done that. I know what it feels like, but I have not done your thing your way. So in my coaching practice, I don't have a program. So if somebody were to come to me and say, hey, tell me about your program, how long does it take? Like, how big is your goal? Well, what is your goal, right? Yeah. So the thing that consultants and coaches often get wrong is that they think they are supposed to show up with a recipe book and tell you how to do it. And that's why a lot of people don't like working with coaches. They have this misunderstanding, and it's to some degree it's our own fault as a bunch of coaches, but it's that I don't have a recipe for you. But what I do have is a framework for asking questions, holding space, asking, making respectful challenges, asking about patterns that I have seen and whether they apply or whether they don't apply, because you're doing your own thing your own way. Most people are not trying to be in a commodity market doing everything exactly the same way as everybody else. So my job is to come in and support somebody on their own unique journey in the process. And it does help that I understand some of the technical components of what my clients often are doing. I don't only work with technical folks, but that's kind of from an ICP kind of standpoint. Having a coach who understands the space that you're in at some level is often helpful, because it's a shortcut to shared language and understanding what the problems and challenges are.
Yeah, that makes sense. I think about, even I've thought about doing consulting or coaching, and I did a little bit of coaching years ago in a different industry, but you're right. Like every not only every industry, but every business and every individual and every situation within that is different, and so asking questions, that starting there. With a framework of questions, I love how you put it that way, seems like the right route to take. Because if you just go in and be like, you got to do this, 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 and this, period.
Yeah.
This is the way you do it. Stop what you're doing now and do it my way.
There are definitely times
would not be a good way to coach.
You need to do things a particular way. And if you don't do them a particular way, you run into other kinds of problems, like the lawyers come knocking on your door. Those are things that we generally don't want to do.
Well, that's true. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
But there are relatively few of those things. And oftentimes what we'll do is, if it touches into my experience, I'll talk through that. But if it's something that there's a technical specialty, a lot of times I'll talk to clients and I'll say, look, you really need to talk to an attorney who is competent in employment matters, because that's not your general attorney, right? So I don't give legal advice. I'm not your CFO or your CPA. So, hey, like, this is how we think about these things, but here's the kind of framing of the questions that if I were in your shoes, I would be wanting to ask my financial professional is what does that look like? And so it's this is kind of a blend between coaching and consulting, where the definition of both of those disciplines is, what do you need, not what do I want to tell you to do. That's where coaches and consultants usually go wrong.
Let's talk a little bit about teams. I know that's one of your probably things that you help from the executive side of things, and helping build teams and manage teams or hone teams to do better. What have you, I think we talked about in a previous call, you were talking about makers versus managers and that type of thing. What can you teach us about teams? What is the biggest things you help with in terms of in that realm?
Yeah, sure. Well, there's a lot of things that go into having a high performing team. And when I mean high performing team, I don't mean high output team, although high output is part of high performance. It's not we're not just trying to drive everybody at 120% so we get lots of output. But high performance team is a team that's actually working cohesively together. And a big part of that has to do with the leader being clear on where the team is going. So a lot of times what we're trying to do is say, this is why we're here. This is what we're here to do together. So purpose and mission. And these are the ways that we're going to show up with each other as we do that. And those are oftentimes core values and management practices. And so when leaders are really clear about why we're here, what we're here to do, how we're going to show up and how we're going to do the work together, now we are starting to have everybody sort of lined up and going in the right direction together. And once we have that, then we have the basis for the team sort of working together effectively, doing different things together. So you mentioned the makers and the managers. I think that was Paul Graham's kind of, hey, there's maker schedule and there's manager schedule. And usually the way this conversation goes, and you'll understand it, and everybody who is in the maker space and the builder space will understand this, is I'm a maker and you're a manager. You need to not bother me while I'm making things, because I need time to make things. Well, the biggest thing that creates tension within teams around that is everybody's making something. In fact, we're making something together, whether we're a services business or whether we're a product business. I've been in both. And it doesn't matter. Everything has to be made. So if you need a contract and you'd like it to actually not end in a lawsuit that costs you all the money and then some that you earned, it's probably useful to make sure that the things that go into that contract are things that are deliverable, they're defensible, they're properly stated, there's a lot that goes into a contract that if you've never negotiated one, really, really hard for you to understand the value of that contract. And that's not just for attorneys to do, because attorneys, they work at your direction. So you have to know what you want the attorney to put into the legal words that give you the best protection all around for you and for your customer. So that takes time. It takes focus and energy. I don't know if you've ever gotten a 50-page master service agreement from some vendor management company, and you got to look through it and you got to figure out, like, hey, guess what? They're asking for something that would actually be illegal if we said yes. So we got to figure out how to negotiate around that. That takes time. It takes intense focus. That's not to say that software and coding doesn't take time and focus. The point is that there are equivalent maker tasks across the board. And so what we have to do as a team is figure out where are the blocks that we use collectively for making things, and where are the blocks that we use for talking about the process of making the things. And once we have that, we recognize that there is value in the talking about the thing. It's not that the work is in the making the thing. The work is in the talking about it and the making it. This is one of the things in Scrum, in Agile land, where anywhere you're using a user story, most people know the user story format. What is it? I'm sure you know it, right? As a something, I need to something so that I can get some result, right? It's I need to so that. And everybody would say, yeah, that's a user story. And most of us would say, no, that's not a user story, because what goes on the back of the card, if you were using 3x5 cards like we did in the old days, you'd flip it up and there's supposed to be something on the back. Do you know what's supposed to be on the back? Ever heard what's supposed to be on the back?
I'm rusty.
It's okay. Most people are. It's the conditions of satisfaction or the success criteria, depending on what label you want to use.
Gotcha.
And the way you get those is that they are an artifact of a conversation. now Scrum and Agile and a lot of different practices have kind of fallen out of favor, but I have never yet seen where a properly formatted user story did anything other than bring clarity. It always brings clarity because we know who we're working for. We know the why we're doing it. That's the benefit statement. And we know what they want to do. We don't know, we don't specify how they're going to do it. But when the team gets together and says, okay, what does success look like for this? It looks like this, it looks like this, it looks like this. And then we can kind of tease out edge cases and corner cases and decide what we're going to do about it. But the whole team is now on the same page because we understood the conditions of satisfaction. So the discussion is part of the development. And so we got to build our system. We have to think about the entire organization as a system and not a set of people who are set up against each other and having the war over whose calendar is more important than the others.
You're working together as a cohesive team and having conversations because it feels like bookends, like the story and the success, the outcome.
Yeah, the criteria.
And then having everything in between, there's conversations, everything, the details are worked out in between. I was trying to so makers, if you were, so where's the managers come into play? So you got the makers, which is this related to the time frames and how we work, makers and managers? Because managers are they're like scheduling things by the hour. Well, makers are more like, I need the whole day to be creative.
Yeah, that's the basis of the distinction, right? Is a manager is going from call to call to call to call. And to be fair, there are those people who do that kind of work more than the other. And the reason that the developer is able to do the deep work of multi-hours of uninterrupted time is because somebody else is doing that. Because if you didn't have that person, guess who'd have to do it? Right. So by definition, you need to value that person because they're doing work that you would otherwise have to do, which you're either don't want to do or not well equipped to do.
Right.
And it's a continuum. So if you talk to most developers, you just want to go in a coding cave, right? Just leave me alone, let me code the stuff, and because that's where I'm the best, and that's not wrong. But if you want to move through the process of being sort of an apprentice and a junior developer and a developer and a senior developer and a craftsman, you have to gain these other skills that are not just software skills. And so we have to think about time, and we have to think about the way that we have blocks of time that are reserved for the work of collaboration that then we break from and we go do our respective things. So who cares if you're a manager or if you're a developer? Friday afternoons, we don't have scheduled calls. But here's the thing. We also have to hold our schedules somewhat loosely, because if the barn catches on fire and the client is off the chain because something happened, I'm going to go interrupt the developer. And I'm going to try to understand what happened, because I am not going to go, you don't want me kicking around in the code. Not that I could understand what I'm looking at anyway, but you certainly wouldn't want somebody who has the client management, the primary client management side of things to do, but you can't make them wait, because now the client's like, are you trying to hide something? Right? What's going on? I'm really, it's okay. Hey, just give me a minute to go figure this out. Hey, sorry to bother you. I know this is going to wreck your deep work, but we got an issue. So there's some trust that has to be built where the developer is willing to say, hey, if you're interrupting me, it must be important. And if I'm going to interrupt you, it must be important. So we have to have some of these agreements about how and when we're going to interrupt each other. And the same is true if you're a developer and you're stuck because you're like, well, I don't know how I'm supposed to do this and I don't want to make an assumption. So I'm now going to come bother the product owner, but the product owner also is the person who's responsible for the marketing campaign, and they're deep in the deep work of trying to figure out the marketing campaign. Well, guess what you're going to do? You're going to interrupt them because I got to keep my code going. So we just got to recognize that that's how we work, and we can create time blocks in which we can do that interruption because we've just agreed that we're all together making a thing, and each of us is doing our part, and we value all of the parts of getting the thing done.
Okay. So this is actually really interesting, and actually is now it's starting to land in my world. Obviously, because I do we do a little bit of coding over here, a little bit of programming, a little bit of design, and we work with a lot of we have internal teams and we have external. Right, we got other companies and their teams if it's a direct client, or other agencies. And it's interesting as you're talking about. To me, this seems like it's like this. It's how you communicate this to your team, like that is like if you're interrupting somebody, right? You there has to be a scenario where you're not upset by that. That's going to happen. That's just part of we're working together. We're all makers, like you said,
Right?
and sometimes things can't wait. You could try to handle in a meeting. We have meetings weekly. I have stand-ups with all, my developers and those we handle. We go review things. We handle things depending on what we're working on and how often those happen. But there are moments, like especially me. I know I'm very, very guilty of interrupting my developers. But I may have gotten something from, one of my partners and one of their clients, or, something we updated. Maybe it's just a question they have, and I have to dive into Slack and be like, hey, can you answer this? And this is what they're asking. And, but the developer is probably in the middle of something, they're probably, rocking out some beautiful new website feature. Yeah. And deep in that, and then Matt comes along and be like, "Hey, I got this question for you." And I'm not forcing it at that moment. Oftentimes, I will drop it in Slack, and I know they're working on stuff. They don't need to answer right away. A lot of times, they do.
Yeah.
But it's also the opposite. So sometimes I'm like, I have my things, like I have my own hats I wear, and I'm in marketing or doing podcast stuff or whatever I'm doing. And then I always have Slack there, though. Somebody can ping me right now. And a lot of times I will quickly go in and handle something because I want to keep them. I don't want to hold them up. I don't want to become the roadblock for them to get stuff done. But that, I would imagine, have you run into, like, what is the average organization or whatever? How do they usually, is that an issue?
Yeah, it is an issue. And usually what we do is we say, these are the sort of the ground rules for how we're going to communicate. People don't do this. And it's just great things for handbooks that keep them from being dusty things nobody works from. And handbook is a different way there's different ways to see a handbook. So we can talk about that some other time. But the idea is that we have these rules, right? If it can wait until tomorrow's stand-up, then it waits until tomorrow's stand-up, because it's a blocker, but it's not a blocker today. Right. So you got to be in the habit of good communication hygiene. That's what I usually call it, good communication hygiene. So if the agreement is, hey, I'm going to put things in Slack and you're going to ignore them until you're ready, that's fine. If you put something in Slack and then you're like, hey, did you see it? Did you see it? Did you see it? When are you going to get to it? Right? Then we don't have the baseline agreements, and Slack is a terrible thing. So, but if it's kind of like, hey, you are responsible to turn off Slack when you're doing deep work. And if I have an emergency and I pop it in Slack and you don't see it, then it's okay for me to come and hit you on your cell phone if I'm not working in the same physical space. And you're not going to turn your cell phone off from me. You're going to let me pass do not disturb, because if I literally have a bona fide problem, I need to be able to call you. If you don't answer my text, I'm going to call you. And it's going to be because the barn is on fire. It's not going to be because I'm just stuck and I don't want to wait until tomorrow. And the same is also true for you. Like, if you're building something important, this is Eisenhower Matrix is a factor here for how we do things. We need to focus on what's important, not necessarily what's urgent. But if it's urgent and important, then we're going to follow this protocol. So as an owner, as a founder, you also have to protect your time, because otherwise you end up so scattered that you can't do the strategic work that you need to do. And guess what? Strategy is deep work. It's some of the deepest work there is. And if you don't do that strategy work as the founder, then the rest of the organization will suffer in the long run, because you won't be leading it forward. So you have to have those same blocks in your calendar for making strategy, for making the big next advancements. And they have to be able to be punctured, but under these rules.
Right. Yeah, that's the key. It's in establishing and communicating those rules. This is within teams. It's also communicating with clients.
Yep.
And also defining the expectations. Right? Like when you send me an email, I have an X amount of time to answer that email.
Yeah.
And I may have to snooze that email, and I have to look at that email and make a determination. Is this something I can quickly handle now and keep them moving, or how critical is it?
Yeah.
But even my clients, they know if they put urgent in the subject line, it's going to get Matt's attention, or they'll work like one. This is a client, but it's for teams as well. But we use Zendesk, so for a lot of our support. And one particular company I'm thinking of in mind, the owner of that company likes to still email me, but once in a while he'll send me he's like important or urgent or whatever, and gets my attention on a ticket somebody else is maybe handling or whatever. Matt, this is really important. But that's how or I get the phone call.
Yeah.
But those protocols are in place. Right. Most of the time it's when we get to it, or, it's within the framework of just our daily stuff, or it can wait till tomorrow morning or whatever.
Yeah. But that's the service level agreement. Right. We set the expectation, and then we enforce that expectation. I was the CEO at a support company that did tech maintenance and support work. And we had a help desk, and people would send an email to a person, and then we would route it into the help desk. And every single time we would remind them, hey, if you send it to a person, they might be on vacation and it might get stuck, but we've gone ahead and done this for you. And it's constantly training and reinforcing, as opposed to just responding, because that's the lowest overhead thing to do, is just fire off the response and handle it and say, hey, Dave, can you take care of this? But that actually trains the customer the wrong way, and it blows up the team. So we put it back into the regular flow, and we say, hey, according to our service level agreement, it looks like we're doing this, and off we go. Now, we might misunderstand something. If everything's urgent, then we got to address that problem. And so part of it is, the one half of it we were talking about before is sort of setting the expectation, but the other part of it is being vigilant to make sure that we're honoring that, because that's the other piece where it falls apart in the team. Just like, yeah, you said we were going to do it this way, but you keep bothering us, and and it doesn't match, so we're not doing what we say we'll do. And then everything falls apart. But yeah, when we get it right, when we value what everybody's doing, and we create the systems and structures in place that honor that, we really get a whole lot more out of the team. People are happier, they're more productive, and we start to have high performing teams because they are working really well together. They trust each other, and that's the basis of a high performing team.
Yeah, communication is really at the core of so much stuff. That's one of my biggest focuses in terms of, even from the project management systems to Slack. When do you put something in a project management system? That's kind of like email. Whenever they log in next, they're going to see that comment.
Yeah.
But once in a while it's urgent. So then I'll link to it in Slack and I'll say, I need you to look at this ASAP, or this is your priority today. I actually, even communication has been so important for us, and we get so busy, like there's all kinds of things going on. I actually have somebody that actually part of her job, not her whole job, but part of her job is to actually review the boards every day and see if we have a protocol. I'm kind of testing this last probably 3-4 months. It's worked pretty well. I actually got one this morning where she will look at the boards and in ClickUp, and she'll see, she's kind of like a 3-day protocol up to 72 hours. Like if within, you got 24 hours to somebody commented something, they need something, right? Yeah. And she will, I don't know if she does anything there. Maybe she just tags it or something like that. But at a certain point, she's got a comment alert in Slack, and she'll tag that person and link to the task that needs a response. And that's even when I get that, because we get so busy. There's comments, and sometimes, I'll get to that later, and you never find your way back. Yeah. Having those kind of things in place, I think there's at least something I'm testing now. It's really helped.
I joke and I tell people I've spent 100 years as a project manager, and they're like, how do you get 100 years as a project manager? And like, well, you've never been a project manager, because you don't realize it. Like you might spend a year, and that feels like 10 years of your life.
That's true.
But that's the job. Yeah. If you're using Scrum as a framework, which, again, it's in and out of favor depending on what the thing that's cool about Scrum that I've taken out of Scrum and into everything else is the Scrum Master's job is not to tell everybody what to do, but it's to make sure that all the impediments are out of the way. And that's really what a manager's job is to do as well. Also, what a senior developer's job is to do, right? It's everybody's job to make sure the impediments are out of the way. What I find a lot of times is that the board gets stagnated. So we're going to go really, really deep on one thing that's not so much leadership thing, but not so much executive leadership. But a lot of times when the board gets stagnated, it's because we're not working from the board. And the things on the board are they're not scoped well enough. I don't love story points on user stories. I've never liked them. I've never understood the reason for them. Ward Cunningham and everybody else can tell me all about that. But planning poker seemed just like a whole lot of crazy stuff to me. Here's the thing. Nobody wants to deal with time, but everybody understands it. It's the unit that we all it's sort of the gold standard. Time is the gold standard. So we know what a half day is. We know what a full day is. We know what 2 weeks are. We don't need to go say, 5 points is a day and a half plus or minus 3 hours. Like, we don't have to do all that crazy math, right? We look at a thing, we ask a developer to look at a piece, a well-defined story or feature or bug or whatever, and we say, how many half-day increments do you think you'll need? Less than one? 4 hours, 8 hours, 12 hours? What does that look like for you? And then if we don't see any movement on that in the time that it's been scoped for, then we ask the question, hey, what are you working on? Because if you say, hey, I have 2 half-day increments, then by the next day's stand-up, you should be saying, yesterday I finished the 2 half-day increments, and today I'm going to work on the 1-day increment. And I'm blocked on the 1-day increment by this thing. And so now the stand-up becomes something useful. So you're walking the board, which is supposed to be the practice. You're walking the board, and you are seeing your velocity because you're actually getting things done, and nothing's getting stagnated. And I'll say I have a personal bee in my bonnet with developers. And it's one of the things to me that separates a senior developer from a junior developer, or even sort of developer, dev 1, dev 2, whatever. It's not senior developer. If you complain about communicating because you're using the project management software or whatever, because it's too hard, I have serious questions about the code that you write. Because coding software is not easy work. It's complicated. There's lots of dependencies. You have to use different systems. There's loads of different libraries. You have to pay attention to tons and tons of complexity. So if you're telling me that you can't handle the complexity of entering a comment on a card in Trello or in ClickUp or something like that, then I have serious questions about your ability to do the work of development. And as you progress through that, you have to be the person who says, here's the best way we can do that. Here's how we make sure that things don't get missed, how we don't lose things in translation. That's the mark of a growing, more senior contributing member of the team. So again, that usually is anchored in a lack of value, or the perception of a lack of value in the project management system. We got to know why we have a project management system and we value it. So therefore, we don't worry about the complexity. We just do it because it's the right thing to do, and it moves the whole team forward.
We're talking about Scrum, and I actually was a Scrum master for a few years.
Yeah, same.
There's so many. Like I always looked at like Scrum, and we're talking about things that we've probably lost a few of our audience members, but but Scrum is an agile project, management framework, and it's a framework. But I like things like you talk about points and stuff like that. It's been interesting how we've tried to implement it, but our work is very chaotic, and it's unless it's larger projects, we wouldn't even think about doing like pure Scrum or something. But yeah, there's so much when you're talking about the web developers and how they're doing technical work, but the project management software and being able to go in there and actually communicate, it is something that should be really emphasized and prioritized, making sure that everybody, even I think one of the things that I've caught, like sometimes somebody's not doing something and they just don't know how, or they weren't shown, even ClickUp, it can be a little complex, but I remember showing a developer, it was months ago. I was doing something. I'm like, you just have to, I don't know if I screen shared. She's like, oh my gosh, I never even knew that I could do that in ClickUp. So it's creating that documentation, SOPs and stuff too, to build that. But even just reporting and things, like I have all my developers, they give me a daily report of what they did, what they're working on, if they're stuck on something. All that stuff is really, really important at the base levels of management. We've gone way off of the executive stuff here, but got into project management somehow. But that's good.
I'll tell you how we got here. Right, the way we got here, and hopefully we didn't lose too many people, because there's a lot to be learned from things that you maybe don't even really understand. But it's the leader's job to make sure that all of the systems in the organization are functioning well. It's not necessarily the leader's job to define them all and make sure that and go be the policeman of the whole thing, but it's to make sure that it's all running well. And the reason that we got into project management is because a lot of this is one of the places where teams fall apart, because they don't value the work of a project manager, and a lot of project managers may not do it right. But if you don't value the work that other people are doing, you get caught in these things. So project management is just one example. We could have the same conversation about design. We could have the same conversation about DevOps. We could have the same conversation about marketing. Like this is when we're talking about building a thing. Project management is one example, but the pattern of valuing everybody on the team because we're building something together is what matters the most in building a high performance team. You can't get there without trusting that each person is bringing their best to their discipline and that together we win.
So tell me, who exactly do you work with? Is there a specific company out there or industry, or what's your kind of ideal avatar with the people you work with and help?
So when we talk about ideal client profiles, we always have to be clear on the fact that there are the people we can help, and then there are the people that are sort of the perfect, ideal, if you could imagine and craft them. I work with all kinds of people in all kinds of domains, which is really good because divergent thinking is super helpful for unlocking different problems. But when people ask me about my ICP, I'm usually talking to a founder who wants to tell a story about whether they're lucky or good, right? So when you're starting something out, you want to be good, not lucky. But if you don't know which one it is, this is particularly a thing for second-time founders, which, you know, they've had a good exit or a reasonable exit, or maybe they didn't have a good exit and they won't want to have the same thing happen again. But usually they know, if they've had a successful exit, they know what they don't want to do again, but they're not necessarily sure how to avoid having a repeat of the things that didn't go well the last time. So as you know, I have a lot of background in tech and both software and physical product, but also in services. So when I talk about an ICP, I say it's a pinnacle leader, usually a founder, CEO, executive director, managing partner, who is got a big growth goal, understands that investing in themselves is an investment in the big growth goal, and that they are actively looking for somebody to walk along with them in that journey, to help them figure out the stuff that everybody's expecting them to know, but I can't say that to them. They are all looking to me that I have no idea. I don't know how I'm going to figure it out. Who am I going to talk to? My spouse is tired of hearing about it. My friends are tired of hearing about it. They just go figure it out, man. Just go figure it out. And so they're feeling all of that kind of pressure. And so the reason that my company is called Paravel, it's para from Greek, which means alongside, and vel from Latin, which means to want. So for somebody who wants someone to walk alongside them in this journey of leading this new and different thing toward a big goal, then I'm for them. And I have that background to be able to leverage it, to talk the same kind of language. I've spent loads of time in marketing and doing, you know, operational work and all kinds of things. So those are really the folks that I'm looking for to work with, they've got a big growth goal. They understand that they can't do it by themselves. It's not healthy. It's not safe. It's not mentally healthy for them to do it on their own. And they just want a thought partner who thinks like a co-founder and can help them dig into to new and different ways of doing things.
Thought partner. I love that. That's amazing. I need a thought partner. Besides my dog. Hangs out with me.
Dogs are good thought partners, though.
I have a thought. What do you think? Rolls over. All right. Well, so if somebody would like to learn more about what you do or wants to reach out to you and get in touch, or do you hang out on the World Wide Web somewhere? Do you got a website?
I do. I have a website. It's paravel.com. It's P as in Paul, ARAVELLE, 2 L's, .com. You can find me on LinkedIn, David C. Bates on LinkedIn. I'm there pretty regularly. So if you want to know more of that, can't remember Paravel or can't find it, hit me up on LinkedIn, and I'm happy to chat there.
Nice. I will see. Yes, I see you on LinkedIn. I see you. All right. See you around. Thanks for joining us, Dave. Until next time.
Thank you.
That's all for today's episode. I hope you enjoyed that. Again, please subscribe if you haven't already and give us a thumbs up if we deserve it. Now a word from our sponsor, my agency, Unified Web Design. We build custom websites, features, we maintain websites, we work with agencies to fulfill their web design and development needs, and more. If you're interested in our services or are looking for an agency to work with as a partner to build awesome sites for your clients, feel free to reach out to me at unifiedwebdesign.com. There's a handy contact me link at the top. Fill out that form and it will open a ticket, and that ticket will find its way to me. Thanks for joining me today. We'll see you next time.